Yeah, so if anyone's here in the chat, we're live on YouTube and we're live on LinkedIn, I believe. I think I linked it to that. But yeah, if you're here already, pop something in the chat. Let us know you're here. Well, a few late registrants have just popped up as well. We'll give it a couple of minutes just for people to arrive. But we should have, there's about 65 people registered, 65, 70 people, so that should be good.
Okay.
Yeah. Give it a sec. Right, let's get started, shall we? Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the School to Prison Pipeline Evidence Project podcast. We're really grateful today to be joined by Richard and Christine Locke to discuss Matthew Locke, their late son, who this topic that we're discussing is a very sensitive one. We're talking about suicide and ADHD. So just as a prior warning before we start this podcast, I'm just going to pass over a few different options for people because some of the things that we discuss in this might be triggering for some people. It might upset you. Obviously, there's probably a lot of lived experience on the call. We want to make sure you're supported. So just as a reminder, Samaritans are available 24 hours a day. I've personally used them. I've used them to email them and talk backwards and forwards, and it was very useful for me. I know David, you're a Samaritan, aren't you, David? I believe.
I was in prison.
Oh, okay.
I'm part of the Management Experience panel.
We'll go on to that for sure. So yeah, Samaritans available on 116 123 or at samaritans.org. You've also got Hub of Hope, which helps you find local mental health support services across the UK. You can access them via www.hubofhope.co.uk. There are other support services that are available, but in an emergency, please use 999 if you do need support and reach out to those people that are closest to you. So yeah, we're really grateful for you to join us on this podcast, Richard and Christine. We've met before and we've had a good conversation about Matthew and his life, and I'm sure, like I've spoken to David about this in the past as well, this is a topic that's really close to our hearts, and this, for me, I think this is a topic that isn't spoken about enough. The podcast gives us a platform to achieve that, to hopefully push that conversation forward, and it is a raw and authentic podcast that allows us to share what it means to us to celebrate Matthew's life and talk about the great work that you're doing. So yeah, the podcast itself is our aim is to move the conversation forward around lived experience and research, the school to prison pipeline. We believe this topic is sort of deeply entrenched really in the criminal justice system, but also for the children at school and the way that they're supported growing up. And I'm sure you're going to delve more into Matthew's life as he grew up as well. So yeah, it'd be nice just to hand over to you both and to introduce yourselves and a little bit about the Matthew and obviously the charity.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christine. This is Richard, husband, Matthew's mum and dad. And in September 2023, our only son, Matthew, at the age of 19, took an impulsive, which we believe, decision to end his life under the influence of alcohol, and he'd had ketamine that night. From that moment, we've just asked questions after questions. Why? What have we done wrong? What didn't we see? What have we missed? And it's coming up to 3 years in September. And what we've realised is ADHD was the absolute contributor, basically, of not understanding it ourselves, Matthew not understanding it, his teachers not understanding it, most of the clinicians we went to see, psychiatrists, mental health people, nobody really got the absolute impact ADHD can have on mental health. Now, obviously, it won't be the same for everyone, but with hindsight, we can see now Matthew had been self-medicating for over a year. But he was a fabulous kid. There's no way we ever thought, or we never thought for 1 minute Matthew wanted to end his life or not be here. But we know he was impulsive. We know he could turn on a sixpence, as in be upset, frustrated, get irritated. We didn't get that was ADHD. We actually thought he had a choice. He could just choose when to control his anger, his excitement, his impulsivity. We thought that's just a learning curve. We didn't get ADHD, and that it's actually a condition of the brain, the way it's wired, and that can be a deficit part, the impulsivity, the lack of being able to think of the consequences of your actions, just go in there with the emotion of it. For the excitement, for whether they're angry, sad, every emotion is felt more strongly. We can see that now with ADHD. I'll hand you over to Richard to maybe talk about.
Yeah, I think the thing that we didn't really get is that link into the severity of what ADHD could be. We understood Matthew as parents were different. Matthew was different. That's what made him special in a lot of cases, and what he achieved in his life was phenomenal. People talk about ADHD being a superpower. It can be, but only if it's managed properly and it's understood, and we didn't understand it.
Neither did he.
And neither did Matthew, yeah. And that's really why we've got to get the message out and share the story of, what happened to Matthew. As I said, Matthew was an individual which achieved so much in his life. He was a presenter on ITV this morning. I think he appeared 7 times. Up on the top left there, he had a fascination with vacuums from about the age of 4.
That was his hyper-focus, and that's really what made us initially as a kid think, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on? He's not playing with the football. He wants to fix hoovers. He wants to look under the stairs to see what hoover vacuum you've got, what cleaning items. So all this would make us think, oh, what's going on here? But he was happy. He was engaging. He wasn't naughty in school either, was he? So no, he wasn't picked up.
He masked in school, and that he was in his own little world, and his things that he wanted to focus on very much. And because he wasn't naughty, because he wasn't outgoing and boisterous, everyone just said he was a lovely kid. Get on with it. I think we took him, was it about age 7?
No, the first time we went at 4 before school, and our worry was, my worry, and your mum and dad had said, we'll be honest, your mum and dad said, he's going to be crucified in school if he goes in just talking about vacuums all the time. And we were like, for us, we thought it was quite well, he'll get over it once he's in school, there'll be other things. So we started to worry he wasn't maybe engaging with all his toys, a bit of role play. But he always loved to be in the company of others, but generally he'd go off and find the vacuum or the brush or the mop or something, or the mower, the lawn mower. And but anyway, we were just told, no, actually, when you think about how he was assessed, he was taken into a room on his own with this girl, this clinician, and because we didn't understand really ADHD or autism, she engaged with him on a one-to-one. Well, of course, she wouldn't have seen any problem, because that's exactly what he would be quite fine with, engaging one-to-one. But put him in a room with the kids and he'd be off on his own in the corner, or, not being so, what's the word, compliant with the games. So that was dismissed, and let's see how things go in school. And of course he wasn't particularly the kid who ran round causing havoc. On the contrary, he'd want to clean up in the class and help the teacher, so the teachers thought he was wonderful. But that was him, really, when we look back, that was him trying to get out of doing anything else. I'll put the paints away, miss, I'll do that, unless and he was bright, wasn't he? He was bright, but if he wasn't engaged in something, that was it. And that's now we know that's ADHD as well.
Bright and creative. So he started his own business at about age 8 or 9.
Yeah.
He took a Hoover in from one of his friend's nans, stripped it down, and 10, and got the thing working. From there, he then, very entrepreneurial for that age, started his own YouTube channel, showing people how to repair their own vacuums. And, this was what, 15 years ago, he was doing that. I think some of his videos got 250,000 hits in terms of what he's been seen. So, for somebody that age, he had a collection of vacuums. I think at one point we had 120 vacuums. You can see most of those behind the set on this morning. It was great fun wrapping them up. Me and Matthew took about 2 days to wrap those up and send them all down to London in a removal van, and then 2 days to unpack them and put them back in his shed. So that was fun, but that ITV picked up on him very quickly. And on that first meeting, he actually, Philip Schofield was talking about level of filtrations, and Matthew, he was talking about HEPA filtration, and Matthew actually pulled Philip Schofield up live and said, "No, sorry, Philip, you've got it wrong. This isn't HEPA filtration, it's hospital grade filtration, which is one step higher." And after that, Philip just turned around and said, "Right, we want you as one of the team." And as it happened, he went back. Martin Lewis actually was in the sidelines on that visit and just gave us some advice and said, "Go and diversify, go and review products," and that's what we did. Myself and Matthew used to love going down to London, and he did everything from fans to clocks to phone accessories that he reviewed. And that last one he did with Dermot and Alison, he was really, really cheeky and giving them a bit of stick. So that really, really went down well. And that was like a month before he took his own life. It just achieved what they call as being a regular, and being a regular on the show. So, everything from that point was on the way up, but, behind the scenes, there was other things.
However, also, you can't dismiss right through school, Matthew would encounter bullying. Any kid who's different or any difference, kids will always stick out, and they can be a target. So as a kid wanting to play, or not play, but talk about vacuums, what he can do, what he could sell, what he couldn't do, we got a lot of stick for that. And again, it's a byproduct of his ADHD and autism, that because of the stigma and because it's not fully understood and fully supported and talked about more, he was sort of like, the odd one out in school. He probably did find it more difficult to make friends. He had a little set of mates around him, but there was some that he was bullied, and these little traumas too that hit you through your life, through not understanding who you are, why you may think one way, why you might be the one that can't. We'd say, no, he wasn't naughty in school, he wasn't, but come home and, we used to say, he'll only do it if Matthew wants to do it. Or we call him in a minute. In a minute, I'll do it in a minute. It never got done, the homework. Unless I said, can you go and empty that vacuum or go and take it apart and fix it? Okay. So, it's all very clear now, but he didn't have the best of time in school, especially secondary school. He basically hated school, didn't he, secondary school? He liked engineering, he liked the practical side of things, and he was bright, he liked his maths. But at each point I would go in and say, look, I'm a little bit concerned. He's maybe not writing as well as the other kids. He doesn't seem to hold his pen comfortably. Is that okay? You know, oh no, it's fine. Boys are a little bit behind the girls. Don't worry. Okay, maybe I'm being paranoid, but you don't see him, you know, sometimes the parties, he wasn't getting invited to the parties. That broke my heart. You know, you think you've invited every kid in the class and left Matthew out, or one or two. Anyway, just things like that that you think doesn't go in a kid's head, but it does. It does these little things, which we've now found out that an ADHD child, by the time they're 10, they've had 20,000 more negative comments put to them through teachers, family, sisters, friends, anyone, than a neurotypical kid. And I've worked it out. That's about 6 a day from the age of 3 till 10. That's a lot of, can't you sit still? Can't you just do what your friends do? Why can't you just sit there and concentrate?
Why can't you do your homework?
Why can't you do your homework? Yeah. Why can't you think before you do? You know, because Matthew he was impulsive. He would, well, we were at the tip, but one point a story he'd seen. We used to go now and again, and he'd see all the old Henry vacuums, and he'd go and
I think they call them recycling centres.
The tip, I'm showing my age. Recycling centres, yeah. And, you know, the guys had let him, they don't do that now, they'd let him take the old vacuums, and he could do them up, and he'd go and sell them. I used to have to take them to his school, and his teachers were buying them. They were in the boot of my car. You know, Mrs. Blah, Bride Burns wants one, £35, thank you very much. So, but this time he'd seen a couple of the, you know, the tops of them on the top of the recycling bins. And I stopped the car and he jumped out. So there was the impulsivity. He saw it, he jumped out. He's about 12. His leg slipped under the back wheel of my car. And honestly, only I just stopped. Luckily, I wasn't going fast. I'd have gone over his leg. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? Maybe that'll teach you to think. But it didn't, because nobody knew why he was impulsive. We didn't get, there's something there that doesn't quite, the brakes aren't as strong.
The 2 and 2 we never put together, and certainly not at that age.
No. And nobody else knew who we were talking to when we would say doctors, teachers, and, you know, we know teachers are teachers, they're not professionals. And, you know, everyone, no, it's fine, wonderful, don't be worrying. And I used to think, well, I know if there's a group of kids, Matthew's the one who'll fall in the canal.
Yeah, I can't remember how many times on holiday we went away with kids. We'd be around the pool. Every time Matthew would fall in, either
up
me
to a certain
or one of our friends would end up fishing him out, watch and money still in our pockets and phones. So it was always that sort
and it did become, you know, the joke as a warm joke and endearing, but at the same time we used to say, why? Now we understand he was accident prone up to a certain age. Yeah.
So in school, he picked up on politics,
debating and arguing.
Well, yeah, and he actually loved it. And again, sort of another massive hyper focus for him. He literally would walk the streets. There was nothing he would enjoy more than canvassing, either talking or debating with people. Even his school teachers used to say, oh, he's a great debater because all he'll do is talk about politics and argue with me all day. And again, that was probably a way of getting out of doing any homework or whatever.
Doing his physics. His physics teacher used to say he's great, but we never get any work done. So, yeah, that was...
I think pretty much on the day of his 18th birthday, he became a local councillor in terms of parish councillor. He was then elected as a town councillor from a gull. Again, literally before he took his own life, literally weeks before he'd been shortlisted to become a councillor on the county council for Sefton. which he was going to stand for, and was in a very, very safe seat and had been selected for that. So he would have been a councillor.
Yeah, but he was putting himself out there. He was out there on social media, and what we didn't get as well at that point was RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. You put somebody, and weirdly with ADHD, you know, that heightened sense of justice, that sense of, I'm not being told, this needs to be out there. He was a target for obviously opposition, and really for people who should have known better too, because he was, at the time, he would have been 17 when he started, and he would be out, and for him that was his dopamine hit. We get that now. Going out, clearing up an old I don't know, an old derelict part of the community. He'd love to go
clean
out.
up the subway all the time, and that
paint
was
over
local
graffiti
drop spot anywhere that he could find. People, and that was another frustration. He'd put his phone number literally out. Anyone want any help? And everybody had phoned him. So he was permanently on the go. But again, he loved that and loved the chaos of it. Being able to sort of go and help people out in a crisis was what Matthew loved.
Well, how much, you know, we'll never know how much can you take of that as a kid.
And we've been now made aware of some, you know, quite cutting comments, some derogatory comments, and a lot. And actually, at age 18, and actually it was even before that, you know, what effect that had on him, we'll never actually know. You know, some people out there who should have known an awful lot better, some ex-professional police people as well within that, who were seen to criticise him. So we you know, never really will understand that and what effect, and we've only really learned that after his death. I don't think it was the be all and end all, but it certainly didn't help. And you know, that toxic nature of social media is certainly playing into that.
Well, that's exactly it. And also what we didn't know was the 30% behind with executive function. I don't know whether, you know, everyone would be aware of that. With ADHD, up till about 25, 30, it sort of levels. You find yourself, you're more mature, but up until then, like at 19, you look at 30% less. Matthew was making decisions as a 12 and a 3/4-year-old. Didn't mean he was academically or didn't have any, you know, he wasn't clever, but his decision making.
It's that frontal cortex that hasn't fully developed. And
it was very immature.
And that's very typical with ADHD, and that helps in terms of the decision making and the consequences, and it's that element of consequences.
There's a vulnerability there too, isn't there? This is why you're getting young kids being groomed into county lines, and you know, peer pressure on them. They feel like they don't fit in. Oh, where's big man gang says I could do something for him. Of course they're going to do it. Yeah, great, look what I'm doing. They won't think of the consequences. They think, great, you know, they want me. They're not making the right decisions, obviously, and they haven't got the support. They may not have the right environment. They're not
fitting in with the society as a norm anyway, and that's where you sort of, okay, so if somebody then befriends them, then they're open to that element of grooming.
It's always a vulnerable kid.
There's a vulnerability in there for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the neurodiversity involved in criminal activity, both ways, being the victim and the perpetrator, is very high, isn't it? It's absolutely high. That's, you know, now when we look at any news story, I'll say that person, I bet, has had some form of neurodiversity. They may have not been supported, understood, managed. And lo and behold,
managed is the big
thing. And with Matthew, I think if we'd have understood, if I'd have been well, you are familiar with Sarah Templeton, Carl, obviously, and her book, How Not to Murder Your ADHD Kid. Honestly, if I'd have read that book, I'd have understood Matthew more. I think I would have pulled back on, You know, oh, come on, you just need to do it. You just need to focus. Why you were so sensitive, why you were acting out over something and nothing. I'd have got it. I didn't get the emotional and busy brain of ADHD. And that is probably the worst thing of it.
Well, I think we didn't understand it, and you look at the statistics on the screen there. Between about 5% of children, and it's probably more that have
Definitely.
ADHD and the neurodiversity in its broader sense. When you've got 700,000 people on a waiting list, what's that doing to the country in terms of where we are? There's key links, and I guess the work that Carl, yourself and we did in terms of the ADHD task force, that really brought that prevalence home in terms of, the school exclusions, the unemployment, and really what the cost to the country was overall. We didn't get it all, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about Matthew's diagnosis, but when Matthew died, I couldn't accept that I've lost my son, and I didn't understand it, and I had to find a reason for it. I just went into research mode. I came across a very long story, which I won't go into all the details on, but a guy called Dr. Peter Mason that had done a lot of work linking addiction with ADHD. And we'd seen with Matthew that prevalence of addiction,
well, we didn't.
Out there.
We thought he was being a teenager, didn't we? Drinking too much.
We didn't link it to ADHD, but we saw it as that.
No, it was a link.
But when we then researched it and saw that link, then that was quite frightening and quite stark. And obviously the link then started to drop in, and we started to open up that research and look at suicide. The prevalence and the links between addiction and suicide became very, very obvious, and linking that all into ADHD. And the stats then start to show that people with ADHD can be 12 years shorter lifespan. Well, why? You're making impulsive decisions, there's a risk of suicide, there's a risk of addiction.
There's a risk of the criminal justice system.
Reduce your life expectancy, and if it's not managed, and that was the key bit, and we didn't understand it, and we were now on hindsight looking back, we weren't able to manage it because we didn't understand what we had, and we didn't understand the risk. So in terms of Matthew's diagnosis, as we said, we took him very early on in 2009. In 2018, we took him into Alder High. There were huge omissions in terms of the treatment that Matthew got. We were asked to complete what's called an ASEBA questionnaire, which is a pre-screening questionnaire. When you go back and look at those results that we filled in, it showed the prevalence of ADHD. It was never used as part of Matthew's clinical diagnosis, and he was given an autism diagnosis. Along that period in 2019, we ended up going into CAMS as well, because Matthew was starting to have some severe meltdowns that were really affecting us as a family.
Well, we were frightened, weren't we, of what he might
do and the consequences
in an impulsive moment.
But again,
not depressive
we didn't
moods
really
an impulsive
understand
moment.
the links of all of that fully back into ADHD, and we're hearing so many stories from people, that are replicating what we've seen. Again, we were asked to do an ASEBA questionnaire. That was never screened and never used. And again, when we've gone back and looked at that now and worked out, both of those showed a very strong prevalence for ADHD. In 2022, Chris came into a bedroom one night and said he's got, he had a diagnosis of autism or Asperger's from the 2018 diagnosis.
So yeah, no, because this sort of, I felt like this was a baptism of fire. But Matty was about to start uni at 18 at Edge Hill in Liverpool. Well, and I was just sitting there and I thought, hang on, how on earth is Matthew going to manage his time, manage himself, manage the spare time, prioritise, get himself to these lectures on time? Because I knew he couldn't really do that. But I didn't know that was, I wasn't sure what it was, but I thought, hang on. I looked at ADHD, 9 out of the 10 symptoms or 8 out of the 9. And I thought, yeah, he would be late. I don't think he could prioritise. As bright as he was and creative, I thought, so I just said to you, Matthew's got ADHD. So luckily we were in a position, luckily, because it wasn't a good diagnosis, but we were in a position to pay. We went to the ADHD Foundation.
We went through the ADHD Foundation and paid because Matthew was at that point, he was going into university. We had to do something quickly if it was going to change the outcome of what was happening through university, although we didn't really understand the significance. We went to see the ADHD Foundation. They did a QB test on him, which showed very strong prevalence of ADHD.
Well, the term was severe. But the other thing was, we told them quite clearly that Matthew was drinking heavily, because the question on one of the questionnaires is, any problems with alcohol? Most we said yes. He goes missing for hours. 2
key questions. One was, is there any issue with alcohol? And we spelt that out very clearly. And the other said, has there been any involvement with the police? And my answer was, no, not at this point, but if it carries on, there will be, because that was the trajectory that he was on.
But that was never highlighted.
Those were never picked up on.
Yeah.
What happened then is unbelievable in some respects, that the ADHD Foundation sent us through to somebody who should never have actually ever treated Matthew. He was writing prescriptions on somebody else's notepads, wasn't CQC qualified, registered to practice privately, but gave him a diagnosis. The diagnosis was done in 14 minutes on a Zoom call. So that just tells you how bad the situation was. This was after COVID. People had got used to using Zoom, so we thought that was normal. But part of that 14 minutes was us, actually, we were on the call. We turned around and said to the guy, whoa, you're prescribing medication here. Do you know Matthew's drinking an awful lot? Do you know there's a problem with drink? And his answer to us was, if he can handle the hangover, he can handle the medication, get on with it. And Matthew couldn't handle the hangover and couldn't handle the medication.
Well, he never talked to him properly. He never explained anything.
We never, and you look back on that, talking about a key moment of realisation for us as parents, that let us down in terms of
a simple sentence like, hang on, son, do you know that how much are you drinking? Let's be honest, because there is a link with ADHD and alcohol, drinking alcohol, and it could be that's you're drinking that as a form of self-medication, but you won't know that. There could have been so many things he should have said to Matthew, and then we'd have jumped back and gone, oh, hang on, so that's why he's drinking, to quieten his mind, because he can't cope. Oh, okay, we get that now. We just thought he was being a teenager, I'll drink as much as I want. But he was drinking more than his friends. His friends would know when to stop and he wouldn't. His friends would often bring him home in a right way. And I used to think, the next day he'll feel awful. He won't do it again. Of course he would.
It had gone beyond social drinking. He was drinking on his own, and he was hiding the fact that he was drinking on his own.
We found it in his bedroom, bottles of wine.
That's when you've got a problem. He wouldn't talk to us. He wouldn't open up, but we didn't know, and we didn't understand.
If we would have, you know, there was nothing there, and certainly we didn't know there was a rare. People say impulsivity. Well, that can be for anything, and you can be impulsive in making a decision to take your life. And we never got that, because there's a lot of fluff around ADHD, you know, oh, lack of focus, not good with time management. We know the most debilitating part of it is the lack of emotional regulation and the RSD. I'm saying we know now with hindsight, with Matthew, and with the hundreds of families we're speaking to at the moment, from the age of 7 to 65, people who've gone through addictions, who are struggling, now they're understanding why, people who are going through the justice system, people who are getting in trouble with the police, kids that are getting suspended, put in isolation, not understood, no diagnosis, and if they are on the pathway, we're looking at 3 years. School's gone and been and gone then, and then there's your
lives
pipeline
are already
into...
changed. And what you're saying, Carl, is absolutely right. They're already in a pipeline, but actually with no treatment, no care, no diagnosis, no change, then those people are just being totally overlooked. The system of schooling is just letting them down totally and utterly, and they're being bypassed, and that's affecting their lives. You know, Matthew was lucky, he got through in terms of his GCSEs, and there was a reason behind that, and I won't go into it all, but it was a lot around COVID that he never got picked up. But, you know,
it's not all on teachers. God, they've got the jobs cut out, but there has to be a change. There has to be something looked at, because it's not working at the moment. And if you brought social media into this now, and it will exacerbate any ADHD, and it won't cause ADHD, but it certainly could bring on the traits and symptoms of it, and that's been proven by research through a program called Swiped. But anyway,
so I said we'd talk a little bit about Matthew's diagnosis. This is the form that we filled in. You can see here attention problems, you'll see oppositional defiance, and you'll see attention problems.
They're all in the clinical range,
anything above the line is clinical. That's what should have been scored. That's what should have picked up on the fact that he had symptoms of ADHD, and that was never taken, and that was on 2 occasions, both with CAMS and with Alder Hay. As I said, you know, we've had to live now with the stark reality of Matthew. One night, went out, said, I'm going to be a couple of hours, I'm just going to meet some friends. 4 or 5 hours later, after numerous phone calls trying to find where he was, what was going on.
It was only down the road, but we wanted him in. It was a Thursday night. It
was a balmy, very, very hot night. It was subsequently found he spent most of the night in a beer garden with some friends, walked back with his friends, albeit at about 1:30 in the morning.
That was what?
Came in, knocked on the door. We were obviously in bed. He couldn't get in, and then decided to go and jump over the side gate of the house, which leads to the garden. And we've got a log cabin at the bottom of the garden with a bed in. We just thought, oh, he's going to go and sleep down there.
I wish it was raining. I wish it had been cold that night, because I wouldn't have let him. And we know that night we made the wrong decisions. We let him stay. We thought he was safe. I never thought for 1 minute that would enter his head. We didn't know he'd had ketamine either. And that's another thing that is rife, and another subject.
Disassociation.
But, and kids who are struggling are taking ketamine. So the next day.
He went down to his shed. He texted some of his friends. He texted one of his friends and said, I just want to be dead. his friend had communicated with him and said, "Oh, look, we'll
We'll
talk
go
about
for a
it."
drink, we'll go for something to eat and have a talk.
Yeah.
But one of the things he'd said too was, I'm locked in a shed, which he wasn't. And so the ketamines obviously done something to his mind. He'd gone into the log cabin himself. We'd been there all day with our friends and we'd had a great day. It was one of the hottest days. So I'd seen him go in and I thought, well, you know, if he's being funny and wants to go in there, there's a sofa bed. If he'll come back down, knock on the door. That's what he wants to do. I never thought for 1 minute that would happen. However, if I'd have understood ADHD, if I'd have understood the emotional and the impulsivity and the RSD and the lack of being able to sometimes executively,
and the risk of suicide, which is very, very prominent.
Let him go down there. We'd have said no, he's not going down there. We didn't even think that was a thing.
Now, what we know, what we've researched, what we've proved, you know, there is that prevalence of suicide, and people need to know about that and the link to it. You know, it was never on the NHS website. As Carl will know, we joined the ADHD task force and we finally got the website changed, so it now says about addiction and suicide. I produced a 30-page report on suicide and did a meta-analysis of all the links that were out there and presented that to the NHS. And thankfully, there was the interesting thing within the NHS is that the fractions of the NHS. So Berkshire actually have a whole page on addiction,
ADHD and suicide.
Yeah, other parts of the country don't actually recognise that it's part of it, but we got NHS England to bring that all together. Matthew is obviously on this morning. We tried to get back onto this morning and talk about that. They refused from a legal point of view because they said that there was no legal stance to
well, they wanted to see the research
behind it. Despite me sending them the same paper, they wouldn't put us on until the NHS finally changed the website, and then we got back on. So, you know, there was a lot we've learned, and you know, we're now working with the NHS in some of the programme work. Obviously, the NHS task force has completed its findings. Unfortunately, some of those, or all of those, seem to be kicked into the long grass again. You know, we're concerned about that for sure, because all the while we've got people who are taking their lives and losing their lives, and people.
Well, we've got the youngest. Families have reached out to us, but the youngest we're talking about 9, 10, 11, and 12 kids who are saying they don't want to be here, and that the parents don't know what to do. You know, so it's very real. Not long after 2, we were hearing Liam Payne had taken a cocktail of drugs, ended up off a balcony. He was late diagnosed at 34, Liam Payne. If you look at these, there's so many people that Johnny Vegas has been open about his journey with it, and you know, his late diagnosis. Lewis Hamilton's just said he's ADHD. Well, he'd have to be for what he's doing, you know. So it all, you know, it all makes sense when it's managed, isn't it? When it's understood and supported.
But you know, I think that's the big thing, is you've got to know what the risks are. If you're going to do something, you know, everybody's probably heard of the term risk assessment, but you know, when you get told about something, you've got to understand what the worst possible outcome can be, and then look at how you manage that. We were never given that information.
No.
Yes, we could have gone and got it ourselves. We did after the event.
But what would make us put suicide in?
It kills us.
It took us to put ADHD and suicide in after the event. And that's when we saw all the correlations, and we were like, oh my God, look at this, look at this. but all through the most debilitating part and trait and symptom for those who are really impacted, the emotional dysregulation, the busy mind, the mind that doesn't switch off. And that is not in the symptoms, emotional side of it. That's not in the DSM. You might get restlessness, not being able to focus, but sleeplessness, but nothing to do with your emotions. And that is, you think of anything, what's one of the biggest things that will make you make a decision? It's your emotions. And if they're out of kilter and you're impulsive, you can make the wrong decisions and without seeing the outcome, without being able to see the consequences. And this is why, we feel like kids are going down the wrong route.
It's one interesting thing that happened to us. Our lives our lives have been lost the day Matthew took his life, and we're not the same people anymore. My world is just shattered, and as Chris's is. We actually didn't know how to cope, and we're nearly 3 years on, and we've still no idea how to cope. One of the things we did was go to a bereavement by suicide group. There was about 12 people in the room, and for the first 3 months we probably went and said nothing. Some of this started to become clear in terms of the research that we were doing, and actually we talked openly about what we did. And there was 12 different people in the room when we were explaining what we'd understood with Matthew's story. By the end of the night, every one of them had either openly come to us or privately come to us and said, whoever their relative was, that they believed they had ADHD, and they'd also taken their own lives as well. And that then started me to really think that this was something serious and something real that we'd come across. And that was really when we started to push and drive this, and the research went into sort of hyper mode. And some of the work that we'd done, and it's really interesting because also some of this has come full circle. That as I said, we came across Peter Mason. Peter Mason had done some work with people suffering with addictions, and he treated a number of people.
He took 40 people, didn't he?
Yeah.
So he's adult ADHD psychiatrist, and we ended up talking to him after we'd lost Matthew, and he'd done research into treating these people at ADHD. So whereas at the moment they're saying they won't treat...
They were seriously addicted, some of them with opiates, right across the spectrum, and by treating them with ADHD meds, it actually gave that dopamine uptake from the meds, and they didn't need to take it from anything else and get their buzz from anything else. And even I think 2 people he lost contact with through the process, but I think 38 people that he saw through the whole process actually
brought down their addiction,
seriously reduced or gave up their addiction. And actually some people had even given up smoking as well on top of that. So it actually had gone even further than he thought.
We understand medication's not the answer for everyone as well, and that's a titration process that's got to be done properly as well. But it can. Research has shown it can mitigate against the risks of addiction and impulsivity. And maybe in the formative years, when you've got a kid who's not knowing whether they're doing, running around here or there, maybe that would be something that gets them through the formative years without them getting into trouble with the police, making the wrong decisions, getting pregnant, getting someone pregnant, getting into debts, gambling. We're just hearing so many stories along those lines, and ADHD, misdiagnosed or not diagnosed, is behind it massively.
So about it's probably we've been a year as a charity now. We set the charity up probably just before Christmas over about 15 months ago, we realised that, you know, that significant impact, that one bit of paper really that could have changed the outcome for us in terms of getting that medication early for Matthew in his life, possibly could have had a change in his outcome. And we started offering both the ASEBA and brain gaze screening tests, which Chris does every week in the community. We occasionally do it beyond the community and do other things. But we've now sort of broadened that out. We're using EFSIM and CRIOS as well to give people a full picture. You know, the beauty of having 4 different tests is that, you know, some of them are subjective, some of them are objective, but that gives a whole rounded approach to a diagnosis to be able to take forward into that diagnosis. We found a lot of people who, both in schools and clinicians, GPs, who were refusing people to put them into the system. But by taking this as an evidence base, it's unlocking a lot of opportunities for people.
They're obviously not formal assessments,
No.
but these are the Achenbach system of empirically based assessment. That's what teachers and Senkos would look at anyway, and clinicians recognise. But as a charity, our mission is to bring early screening into schools just as early as possible, to bring in identification for that child. It's not the rocking on the chair because they're trying to be disruptive. They can't help it. They can't help it. So let's do something else. I don't know what, we can work it out, reasonable accommodations, even the way you speak to some of the kids, because you make a demand. If you've got oppositional defiance and say, sit down, that may not work. But if we talk to, we have compassion and understanding.
I think that the one thing that I've seen from this, and Chris is very, very close to it, but when you're giving that, it's not a diagnosis as we say, but when we're giving that evidence base to people, it's reaffirming what they've thought, that there's an answer, there's some reason I've felt different all my life and I've been struggling mentally. And you think about that, you know, we're seeing people in the 50s and 60s that have been living with that, and they're literally in tears when we're giving them those pieces of paper and those reports, and this, God, I knew there was something, but I just wasn't sure what it was.
Really, really emotional when we've done some of the screenings, and you know, the person, men, grown men, women will break down, and you know, oh my goodness, I get it, you know, that's why. And we just have an informal conversation about ADHD and what we didn't know, but what we do understand about it. And these people didn't get it. And the minute you maybe mention RSD, we have a lot of leaflets through, we've got through the research and that, haven't we? I forgot what I was going to say now. I keep doing this, I'm sorry.
It's just that unlocking that knowledge and that power for people then to take on and to take on that challenge, and that's given them the power. We've seen some incredible results in terms of, you know, that what that power can do. The people that have turned their lives around in a very, very short space of time. One young girl was struggling, was falling out the school system, wasn't going to school, got a screening through us, luckily was able to get a fast track in terms of an assessment. Within the space of 2 or 3 months, she was projected to get 2s and 3s at GCSEs. In 3 months later, she actually took her GCSEs and ended up with all grade 8s and 9s.
She couldn't believe it. She said, she was texting her mum, I can write I can get down what's on the board onto paper now. I could see it before, but she could never translate that.
People just
everyone's
seeing
different,
that and that was with medication, but we're hearing so many stories that
it wasn't a smooth ride.
Yeah,
you know,
it's always hard in terms of getting that titration right.
But for years they thought it was anxiety, a girl with anxiety, and a form of depression, and it wasn't it, and yet mum had been pushed away from the system each time. CAMS, you know, and emotions were all up and everywhere, weren't they?
And we got so many success stories, and you know, that's what makes us believe we're on the right track in terms of, you know, these things. If we can get this diagnosis into school, then what does that do? You know, as a country, and you know, I've tried to cost this up and I'll come on to it, but you know, we've got so many kids that aren't in school full stop, the NEETs, not in training and education. You know, if they're not there, what are they doing? Probably causing trouble
They
somewhere.
want to be bored, aren't they? They don't want to be out of school.
So, you know, that whole, as you quite rightly say, school to prison pipeline, in terms of that, it's there, and we've got the opportunity to change that. Not for everybody, I get it, but if we can make a significant impact into that, you know, there are further consequences. You put layers and layers of stress on somebody young that doesn't feel as though they fit in, then you know, they can become radicalized, they can go into county lines. All of those things lead to even further problems and massive costs for the country. You know, some of these radicalized people that we've seen, you know, they're actually turning up that, you know, yes, there is ADHD, yes, there is autism behind that. But if we get to understand that and manage it, then those future costs will be a fraction of what they are in terms of fixing it long term. You know, we're in a mad situation that we've got prisons that are full, and we can't build enough prisons. Yet we've got to stop the people going into the prisons. That's the key bit. You know, some of what you guys have been talking about, and you know,
exactly what we're seeing through the charity.
You know, we're trying to get upstream, and we're trying to make that effect, and if we can do that in junior schools, and we can do that in the early part of senior schools, we've seen it can change people's lives. You know, in Matthew's legacy, that's really what we want to do.
Because he didn't want to go, he didn't want to, you know, okay, whereas mum and dad were going to, but there's no way. That was an impulsive decision, and he would never have wanted to do what he did.
We've got a legacy with those politicians that we've got, and we're trying to use that from a political game point of view. Bill Esterson, you see down at the bottom.
You probably don't know who Bill Esterson is.
I'm just pointing out
with the
mouse. Yeah. But he knew Matthew very, very well, and has taken on the cause, which is fantastic. We've obviously got the legacy of ITV this morning, and you know, this is not our legacy, it's Matthew's legacy. As I say, I still can't actually cope with the fact that Matthew's not here, and it's not a fact that I can't cope, it's actually a fact that I can't accept it. And by driving the charity and him still achieving, he's still alive. That's all that we've got left. So apologies if we're talking passionately about this, but this is our legacy and Matthew's legacy, more importantly. Some of the things as a charity that we've managed to achieve, we took part in the global conference which in 2025 for ADHD, which did unlock the door for us getting on the task force and doing what we needed to do. Interestingly, we got some funding from Merseyside,
from our local police
to do screening locally. Still
to help with antisocial behaviour,
and the links between that.
We need to reach out as well
again. We did get the NHS website changed. We've met so far with the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, or I ambushed him.
Well, you ambushed him, but we still got our point across. He did say he'd meet with us. We're trying to follow that up.
And then Bill Esterson brought the debate in Parliament about 4 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more.
Which was really well received, because 5 MPs stood up at this adjournment debate, and each one of them can stand up and interrupt. I didn't realise how it worked. Anyway, at each point I thought, what are they going to say? But every one of them was agreeing with, we need early intervention, we need greater understanding. And the 5 MPs themselves were all stood up and said, I have ADHD, I've been late diagnosed, I had a terrible schooling, I hated school. Some of them suspended from school, always in trouble, but they become MPs now. They're understanding their brains. They get what they...
One even did say he was on a trajectory to go to prison.
Yeah. Everybody, it was one of the... They actually said it was one of the best debates they'd ever taken part in and seen, and it was so well received. So we're waiting now, aren't we, to meet with the health minister.
We got invited back to meet the minister. We've been invited back to the all-party parliamentary group, which we did a couple of weeks ago, and presented at that. And then we've been invited back again to talk to them. There's a book launch, which we've been asked to be the guest speakers. So some people might see this presentation again very shortly. So yeah, you're getting a pre-run of what Parliament's probably going to get. So yeah, we've managed to get back on TV. I'd like to do a little bit more, because I think that's the way that we can influence people and change the outcomes. As we touched on, what's the cost in terms of ADHD? If we've got to sell this, my background's in business, you've got to sell things in terms of pounds, shillings and pence, self-harm, substance abuse, disproportionate presence in the criminal justice system. As we talked about NEETs and people not in school, disruptive behaviour, minor offences, and then into major issues. Those are all big things. If we can get this early diagnosis that we're looking for, if we do it at schools, most people, about 80%, respond positively to some form of treatment. That doesn't have to be medication, that can be psychotherapy, it can be all sorts of different. Very often it needs a full holistic view in terms of what that is. But getting that early understanding that will then not lead into further psychological problems and further support is massive. So that's why we've called now for what we're calling Matthew's Law for mandatory ADHD screening. Jamie Oliver's asking for something very similar in terms of screening for dyslexia, but actually there's an interesting link between dyslexia and ADHD, and it's comorbidity. So actually, maybe Jamie, if you're out there listening, then we can do this hand in hand. I don't know whether he registered, Carl, for the podcast, but you can let me know. But that's, a big thing. If we do all that, there's still a problem that we need more people to be able to give that diagnosis. The 10,000 people that we've got out there are actually all doing it today, whether it be in the private sector, whether it be in the public sector, then it's all that base is all there. The key things for this is to change the way in which diagnosis is done. For most other medical conditions, you go for the doctor a couple of times, they'll then give you maybe antidepressants, which a lot of people believe are actually worse than ADHD medication in terms of issues associated with them. So why can't GPs give ADHD meds? Actually, the research shows very strongly you take the ADHD meds. If actually there's a problem, you stop taking them. If you take them and you see a benefit, you carry on taking them. So, it's very simple.
Well,
there's more work that's needed to be done, but yes, you need to check people's hearts and things like that. But again, GPs are capable of doing that. It's about getting that change and getting that assessment that gives us the bandwidth to get more people through. If we do what we've always done, we'll get what we always had. We've got to change something. And with 700,000 people on a waiting list, actually by the end of this Parliament we could be close to 2 million people on a waiting list. The proposal for Matthew's law for getting GPs to do this, and some of them want to do it, some of them don't, some of them just want more money for it.
Give them more money,
But
give them more money to do it.
there's
It
the
must cost us
opportunity.
less as a society to treat it than not to treat it.
And what our ask to Parliament is, let's go and prove it. We can't roll it out over the whole of the country. So let's do it in Liverpool where we are. Let's try it on a pilot on a number of schools. And let's prove it works. If it doesn't, I'll shut up. But if it does, and I believe it will, then you're going to hear an awful lot more from me. So, yeah. But, you know, what's the payback in all of this for a country? Well, initially, you're looking between £3 and £6 billion saved every year. In terms of education, sort of £500 million in terms of that, in terms of exclusion, and then you can add on top of that about another £500 million for dealing with some of the needs. Criminal justice system, you know, massive spend in terms of where we are, and you know, I'm not even putting in offsets against having to build additional prisons and all the rest of it that we're going to have to do, because the prison population will keep growing if we don't arrest this issue that we've got. Healthcare, in terms of where we are, you're talking up to £2 billion in terms of productivity losses. People that aren't, you know, able to work and that side of things, then there's a big change that can come of that. So in terms of that, what it would do, actually, if we could put this in tomorrow, actually by the end of this Parliament, we would have a waiting list of 0. There's potential £3 billion saving per year in terms of where we are against the life of the Parliament. And again, you know, a government that's saying that they're struggling for money, there's a solution for actually making some money and an opportunity to change people's lives.
But on the real human impact as well, at the last APPG we went to a couple of weeks back, there was a police officer from the West Midlands, and they were doing a pilot where they were screening first offenders coming in, and they screened 76. Out of the 76, 70 showed a high indication of ADHD. Now, from that, she was able to give them a really informative leaflet to then explain what that could mean, what they could do from there to look into the possibility of being properly assessed and diagnosed. But 70 out of 76, it's not a surprise.
I think there was a similar thing done across London in Christmas time, where they were offering screenings, and again that proved a very similar sort of prevalence in terms of where it is. So we've come up with, these are just the highlights, but there's a fully costed, I think it's about a 13-page proposal that we've handed to the government on what, you know, needs to be done and what the cost savings are. And again, that's what we're pushing for now as our next step, is to get Matthew's law adopted and to make that change and change people's lives, and, you know, change them for the better, and not have anybody else have to go through what we've gone through. The reality of that, probably unfortunately not, but you know, if we can change the outcome for some of the people out there, then our mission, Matthew's mission, has been worth it. And you know, he's achieved a lot in his life. For somebody 19 to have been on TV, to got into politics, and some
He's done more than I'd ever achieved in my life, but
we just hope he can take that further. For anyone that wants to learn a little bit more about ourselves, there's a QR code on there. The fully costed version of our proposal that we put to the Parliament is on there as well. So you can get that information, download it. I think, Carl, you said one of the questions you were going to ask is there anything you can help with getting the message? Well, if people want to get that and send it to their MP, we'd be delighted. We've got about 5 or 6 people, MPs, that are sort of seemingly supporting us already. So there's only about another 395 that we're going after. So.
No,
So that's us. We've talked for a long time.
no, it's
I
really
could
good.
listen to you all day. Incredible.
Yeah, really powerful and emotional at points. I've written notes, but I'll hand over to David for, I guess, your reflection and kind of where you
Oh,
want
mate.
to from.
Do you know what? There, as you know, Cole, there's so much in what you were saying, Richard and Christine, that I could really resonate with. And to be honest, we're kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. There's nothing you said I haven't agreed with. And really, all I want to say is thank you. Thank you for who you are, and thank you for what you do. You are making a difference, and long may you continue to make a difference. And fingers crossed that Parliament pull their fingers out of their proverbial and start ensuring that Matthew's law becomes law. Because it is. I mean, I was late diagnosed, and with hindsight, I'm able to look back over my life and point to so many opportunities that were missed
Yeah.
for me not to end up spending as long as I did in and out of prison, or as the title suggests, in the school to prison pipeline. Screaming out for early screening to be happening in schools. And one thing that you kind of seem to be repeating throughout your presentation was there's a big difference between knowing your ADHD and understanding your ADHD. I knew in 2010 for 5 years that I was ADHD, but it wasn't until my final prison sentence in 2015 when I had a completely different mindset where I started to understand my ADHD. Lo and behold, that was my last ever prison sentence. Lo and behold, that was the last time I was ever arrested or had any dealings whatsoever with the police. So, yeah, understanding your ADHD, whether it be, like you say, whether it be the person themselves, their parents, their support network, teachers, headmasters, college tutors, prison officers, police officers, wherever, we all need to start understanding what ADHD is, how ADHD can be exhibited, and therefore for people just to have that 2-second break and rather than punish an individual, understand that individual. And Richard and Christine, honestly, just wow, thank you so much. And what an incredible life Matthew led, like you said, and you must be honoured to have had such a son, although it be for such a short time. But honestly,
Thank
you've
you.
blown me away. You really have blown me away. And I was going to say I usually have a lot to say, and I haven't shut up yet. But I'm just, yeah, just wow, Thank
Thank
you,
you. Thank you.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. You know, well done for what you guys are doing as well.
Amazing what
You
you
know,
yeah.
I think we all said it, and I think we've said it on the task force. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Really, we can all see it. I just wish that my glasses were cleaned a lot earlier and I could see it. You know, while Matthew was alive, and that's the one thing that kills me every day.
But it's what you're doing today, Richard, that matters, mate. It's what you're
Yeah.
doing today that's making the difference. I can understand
It's changing
everything
other
you're
people.
saying.
You know, we've got a purpose by doing that, but it will never obviously bring Matthew back, and that's the only thing that, you know,
But
really gives us
Yeah.
You could have
peace,
sat in a
proper
dark
peace.
room and closed the curtains and just seen out the rest of your life, but you're not. You're
Yeah.
putting your head above the parapet. You're standing up. You're a voice that deserves to be heard, and you're a voice that needs to be heard. And again, I'm just thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
it's Matthew.
Of
It's
course.
Matthew behind us doing that, and it's his legacy.
But we need to work together, don't we? Because
Yeah,
we've
of
got
course.
so many kids here that they don't understand the decision making and what it can mean for the futures. So, you know, for us as a charity to be able to give them a support network for these kids that are starting to get into trouble with the police, you know, where would we tell them to go? What, you know, things like you guys, would you be able to tell us, is there something that can support teens who are going down the wrong pathway, even though, you know, they may be waiting for ADHD diagnosis, or they've just got it, but at the age they've got it, they're not getting it, if you like. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's
They're being
hard.
labelled, but they're not getting the support.
Yeah, yeah. So
No.
we're, yeah, definitely need to keep in touch, and if we can help each other in any way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that there are now a lot of peer support groups that are starting to get themselves together, and you know, I think that
Peer support save lives.
yeah,
Yeah,
the latest edition, and I'll give a shout out to James Brown and his ADHD magazine.
Yep.
That's got a good
good magazine.
great
Yeah.
magazine, and a summary of you know
Yeah.
the peer support groups that are across the country.
Mm.
But you know, this shouldn't be charity led. It should
No.
be government led. And you know that's where you know we're letting people down. We let Matthew down, and I can't let other people down. You know, as I say, the work that we're doing, with people get that understanding of, you know, it is something out there. That's why I am like I am. But, you know, it isn't a label, it isn't a stigma. And that's the other thing that we've got to get across.
Yeah.
Some of the most incredible people out there have got, you know, this talent. But it's about
Jimmy White,
and understanding.
Jimmy White, he recently announced
Was
he's
it?
ADHD.
Jimmy
And
White.
then when you look at it and you go, of course you
Of
are.
course, yeah.
I know.
And there's
I know.
many more that you actually now look back and go, God, I'm sure it was.
Alex Higgins.
Well,
100%.
I wasn't going to
I
mention them.
couldn't think of his name. I thought, who was the other fella?
George
Yeah,
Bell.
Alex Higgins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think-
all the greats. Yeah. Mm.
Max Verstappen, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know if he's been diagnosed with it or not, but Max Verstappen definitely is ADHD.
Quite outspoken,
Really?
isn't he? But I was making lots of notes when you were talking, and we've spoken before, haven't we, on another call where we spoke about my feeling and experience with suicide, and I went to BG Head in 2023, and I sought great comfort from talking to you, talking to you both really about your journey as parents, and how you'd, you know, from that moment, and then try to really understand, or maybe trying to convey my experience of the feeling of the wanting to escape. And we've spoken quite a lot about the busy head, and it's ironically, I watched the Avicii documentary last night. I don't know if anyone knows who Avicii is, but basically,
I want to see that. Yeah.
yeah. So he's yes, one of, you know, probably the biggest, well, one of the biggest music artists in the world, and he again spoke of that creativity in the brain, but the busyness and wanting to switch off. And he says that I think he remembers saying it, so wanting life to be simple, wanting to be able to just calm everything. And that for me was the thing that I described my experiences as.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about depression and what someone perceives as suicide, right? When someone goes, right, if someone's suicidal, you picture them as, you know, what's a stereotypical version of events, and you know, what would society say? It's someone who's been not doing much for a long time, or they've been secluded, or they are depressed for a long period. Whereas, you know, when I relate it to my own experience and hearing you speak about Matthew, it's very much the opposite. It's very much they are at their peak, and they are at their they are living, like, they are obsessed with the vacuums. They're like, the vacuums are, yeah, I love the vacuums. And but actually the consequence is when you talk about RSD and that tipping point of emotional dysregulation,
Yeah.
where someone can switch from being elated by Hoovers to being distraught by being like that moment in time where someone is being put down or targeted and I really really empathise with that, because I remember my experience of going to Beachy Head and my life just flippant like a seesaw, you know, and one minute you're living this in this rocket ship and the next minute you're literally on the cliff edge. And yeah, and that's where I think the use of the alcohol and the, you know, the ketamine and those substances, those are the points for professionals that I think are that sudden change in circumstance from or recognizing that emotional dysregulation. um, and when you say about drinking and consuming, you know, trying to regulate how you're feeling, those are the most vulnerable points, I think, because that tipping seesaw combined with that blast of ketamine or alcohol, that for me is where the practitioner's knowledge comes from. I hope that makes sense, but I don't know if either of you, David,
Yeah.
agree. But
No,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think it's about, you know, getting that message, that understanding, and I think probably one thing that we haven't talked about is that, you know, Chris now is ironically got a group of friends who
No, there's
all
four
are in
mums.
the same
Four
situation.
mums, all
So
lost our sons with ADHD, who've taken their lives in an impulsive act. 17, 19, 24, and I can't remember
And
but there's so many.
sorry, Chris, I was going to say at the opposite end of the scale, you've also got young children committing serious crimes as well. You've got young children who are taking their own lives, and you've got young children who are taking the lives of
other
others.
people's lives, yeah.
And
Oh
the
yeah.
recent one, that Lee Ross, who was 14-year-old Kean, I forgot his surname, Moulton, Kean Moulton.
Yeah,
When you read about his story up until he committed the offences he did, it breaks your heart.
yeah.
Absolutely breaks your heart, and the opportunities that were
That were
missed.
Mhm.
Just, it's just, I nearly swore then because I find it
Yeah.
so frustrating. I went through this in the 80s. All right, I wasn't diagnosed until later on in life, and we didn't understand a lot in the 80s. Neurodiversity wasn't even termed until 1999. But I forgot where I was going to go with that now.
No, you were talking about when it goes wrong for a kid and he
Yeah,
can, yeah,
exactly. And it's whenever you look at Axel Rudabacana, I know the
I
crimes
know,
he committed were extremely serious,
I know.
but he 15 missed opportunities.
And he asked for help.
15 missed
Yeah.
opportunities.
He asked for
He
help.
Got
phoned up
diagnosed with
the
autism.
National Crime Agency when he was 13 years old on himself.
Yeah.
So he
Should have
Diagnosed with
done
understood
more.
himself,
autism.
but he just went on and on. There are so many children in secure units that are doing a life sentence that shouldn't.
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
taken the lives of others whose families also shouldn't be going through that situation. It's
Absolutely.
society have got so much blood on their hands that they
Yeah.
need to start looking in the mirror rather than having these blinkers on and
Yeah.
labeling people as evil, as monsters, or as
Yeah.
cowards, whatever
Yeah.
kind of end of the spectrum, and start to understand the reasons why that people are doing these things.
Yeah.
Because if we understand why, we can start finding the solutions to stop it from happening.
Exactly.
And that early
Exactly.
intervention that
Upstream.
can change the direction for people.
100%.
That layers, and we've
I'm glad it
explored
didn't exist when I was a kid,
ADHD.
because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Well, we used to, do you know what? There was a point we'd say, oh God, we'd feel Matthew will either be the next James Dyson or he'll be in prison. So, and so many families have said that. We either say she's going to be the next Prime Minister or she's going to end up in prison. And there's the absolute, as you say, get in there early, let's find out, let's see, let's
Just think about the
understand.
talent that we're losing. That,
That's
if
the
you're
thing.
having conversations like that they could be there or they could be there,
Yeah.
actually, if everybody fulfills, geez, think what this country could be like in terms of unstoppable.
Well, I'm now doing a master's in applied forensic psychology. I was kicked
Wow.
out of the education system at 14 with no qualifications whatsoever and a lifetime in and out of prison. That hasn't come from anywhere. That's always been there.
Yes.
So, it's a shame that my school never found the right way to unlock that potential, and instead they found a way to stifle the talent that I did have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And lay additional stress on you, trying to make you conform to a system that you were not molded for.
Make you feel you weren't good enough.
I was
you
the
weren't
problem.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was the problem.
in
I
their
was the
eyes, yeah.
class clown. I was the problem, not the education
I'm,
system.
I'm a TA. Well, I haven't worked for many years, but I'm a qualified TA. And you can see the kids also, and I do feel for the teachers, but you're also putting them as the gatekeepers to families who are saying, I've got a real problem with our child at home, but at school it's contained or it's not seen, because teachers aren't with them 24/7. They will have a little time with them. So we're getting a lot of, and the current system says they have to see it in school and at home. So parents are saying, we're seeing this at school, we're having meltdowns, we're picking knives up, we're picking knives out of the drawer to say, right, I'm going to end my life, mum. What do I do? We're having meltdowns. When we come out of school, it's like a fizzy Coke bottle being shook, and then take the top off the minute they're out of school. Now, a lot of teachers, they're given a questionnaire like we did with Matthew.
Well, Matthew
and they're
was
saying,
sent to school.
we can't see it,
and
we
actually,
don't see it.
It said he was a model student, no problems, no nothing,
Yeah.
no sort of whatsoever. Yet you go to a QB test, you go to an ASEBA that we did, and he said it was absolutely extreme.
Yeah, this is why we need some digital solutions too, because the teachers also, the jobs, they're teachers, brilliant teachers, they're not psychiatrists either.
Yeah,
So we can't put it on them to say yay or nay about a child
You've
getting
also
referred.
got, we go back to what we're calling for in terms of GPs to do this, but actually you look at the other way, you've got school teachers being the gatekeepers for sending people into the system.
Yeah.
And we're getting so many people that said, oh, the teacher says I haven't got it, but mum and dad say I've got it, I think I've got it, but the teacher says I don't think you've got it. So they're actually then stopping these people going into the system.
Yep.
So you give them, like we're doing on a lot of occasions, giving them the objective, the subjective testing, they're able to take that, and you can't argue with that information pack. But how many times we've seen it in GPs, we're even hearing GPs.
The GPs are saying, I can't refer you because the teacher said no. The teacher, that's all due respect, but the teacher isn't the assessor.
So we're saying in one hand you can only be a psychiatrist to diagnose somebody, but yet the school teacher can make the assessment.
Who initially has to unlock the door for you to get the assessment. So
they're the gatekeeper
that needs
for the
to
psychiatrist.
change.
That disparity with GPs, don't they?
Put it on the teacher.
Is someone's view of their own biases determine sometimes their choices, as opposed to what they're actually meant to do as like a step-by-step process to
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it, if you go back to the politics of it,
criticising
you know, they're being pressurised not to put people into a system because there's obviously impact in terms of, you know, one-to-one teaching and additional work, and there's cost associated with that. But again, if you look at the bigger picture, then, and this is why you need a lot of the different departments in government to all talk together, because actually, you know, if you do it right in the health environment, then the clinicians will not struggle as much. The prison system's not going to suffer as much. The police are not good. But actually, you just got to get all those people in a room and say, okay, you three will benefit if that fourth person will spend a bit more money. Everybody's siloed looking at their own budgets at the moment, and that's what we've got to try and break down and unlock that sort of mentality.
Massive. Start somewhere.
There's yeah, I completely agree, and I think that you're being a massive driving force for that collaborative message, and you should be really proud of that. And the messages in the chat, there's just a few. There's not questions, but there's not a question, but please thank Christine and Richard. My heartfelt thanks and admiration for the strength they have shown and the work they continue to do. Matthew was so lucky to have such wonderful parents. Your honesty will help others feel less alone, and it will encourage important conversations around ADHD, mental health, and support. Matthew's story is powerful, and through your willingness to share it, his life continues to make a difference. Thank you for trusting us with something so personal and for raising awareness in such a meaningful way. And it's just, yeah, lovely. Shelley's asked, I want to support this. Aside from signing and sharing and writing to our MPs, is there anything else we can do? I may be able to offer some time to volunteer to help.
Well,
Lovely.
yeah.
See, that's the
Tell us to
difference
get
you
in touch.
Yeah, we've got our details on
Yeah.
there. I mean, please feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to anyone for that.
Excellent. Well, no, that was, thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thanks.
There was a few technical gremlins at the beginning which I was sorting out, but nothing's ever different there. So I will make sure everyone gets a copy of this circulated, and it's now out on YouTube and all around in the world. So you can literally just share it with whoever you want to for them to watch it back. And I will be doing so. And what I'll do is I'll also share your email address, website, and any other things you want me to pass on to people to make sure that they can get involved if they wish to. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thanks again, and Carl, thanks for all your support. You've been a real strength to us as well.
Us, Carl. You have.
He's all right, isn't he?
He's all right. He's all
Rex
right.
Bill.
But that's the thing, that's why I do this with David, because lived experience in this room right now, and I find that more changes when you surround yourself with people that have been through some things that you have, and also care. I think it creates people that are so passionate about what they do. It doesn't shock me that Matthew was a counsellor, because it makes complete sense, because it's now like the world against all of us to try and pull together and keep that message going, and that's why we do these podcasts, to try and bring that lived experience.
It's getting that momentum and getting that support. If we can do that, please feel free to follow us, anyone out there as well. We'll keep posting what we're doing.
Yeah, excellent
stuff.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right,
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
See you later.
Bye bye.